Welcome to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast. This is the podcast dedicated to people who want to speak more as a way to build their income and grow their business. Well, welcome everyone to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast. I'm your host, Jane Atkinson, and today we are talking about developing the confidence of elite athletes. Now, you might be thinking, I actually think I have all the confidence that I need, but guess what? We're going to come at it from a really different direction, and I think you're going to love it. So please stay tuned. Our guest today is Dr. Paul Schempp. Welcome, Paul.
Well, thank you, Jane. It's delightful to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
I'm so glad that you're here with me today. And every time we talk, something cool is going on. And I'm going to read your bio here in a second because you have got the who's who of cool in your list of clients. But before we do that, you have really studied human behavior and performance and achievement your whole life. How did you get started in that?
Well, very early in my career, we're going to talk about confidence today, a very high level of confidence. But what I soon discovered is I had a very low level of competence.
Whoops.
So I didn't want to be incompetent all my life. So I thought maybe if I study people who are highly accomplished, I'll learn something from them that I can use, and then I could be less incompetent, if you will, and regain my confidence again.
I love it. I love it. Well, your bio shows us that you have them both now in spades. So let me just read this for everybody because I really want them to understand where you're coming from. Dr. Paul Schempp is an expert on high performance leadership. As a University of Georgia professor, he conducts research into the characteristics and development of expert leaders and sports coaches. So intriguing. He has authored 6 books, including the award-winning 5 Steps to Expert. He has delivered over 300 programs in 32 countries on 4 continents. His clients include, now this is a long list, people, but there's so many cool ones. I even trimmed it, but it's just so long. Atlantic Hawks, Condé Nast, Brooklyn Nets, Taiwan Olympic Committee, of course, because who doesn't work with them? Delta Airlines, General Electric, National Basketball Association, PGA of America, SHRM, Singapore Sports Council, and it goes on and on and on. He's got so many interesting stories. We're going to have a hard time keeping this one to a reasonable length, but currently Paul is conducting research on expert decision-making, meaningful mentoring, and the psychology of outstanding performance. So, Paul, your client list is really the who's who, not just in sports, but also in business. Talk about how you marry the two.
Sports and business?
Mm-hmm.
We find that the principles are fairly the same. In other words, to be successful in business or successful in sports, some of the principles, you basically have to do the same things. And I'll give you one example. We find people who are highly successful both in sports and business are goal-oriented. That doesn't mean that they're strict goal setters. It means that every day they wake up, there's something they want to accomplish before they put their head down on the pillow. And again, that translates sports or business. Or I had a great mentor, and he or she showed me some of the things that otherwise I wouldn't have learned. So we find that the connection is very tight.
I love that. And so whether you're a CEO or an all-star athlete, you and I talk a lot about golf because I play golf, and my husband and I went down to the Masters a few years ago, and you were kind enough to give us so many insider little factoids that a lot of people wouldn't know about the golfers. Some of them seem to have all the confidence in the world, but when their game falls apart, what do you think that is actually? It's still something going on mentally, wouldn't you say?
Yes. Yeah. In fact, when that happens to a golfer, we call it, there's even a term for it. The wheels start coming off.
The wheels come off. Yeah.
And so you've played enough golf that you probably have experienced that yourself, right?
Almost on every round.
And so in practice, and that's key, in practice, what we try to do is come up with strategies. So when that happens, and it will happen, what do? And so for different players, it's different strategies. But I'll just give you one. You've mentioned this in a previous conversation we had, was routines, how important routines are. And so if you just go back to your routines, you'll start to focus on the things that will make you successful and less focused on the things that are going to make you unsuccessful.
And in speaking, we could kind of separate this out to two chunks. One would be the platform skills. Obviously, where we need the confidence the most is when we step onto that platform. That's a no-brainer, that everybody needs that. But I'm just thinking about, how do you start to apply this when the wheels come off, when you feel like, oh, I just said something stupid, or I'm losing the audience, they're not with me. Maybe that same thing applies where you think, okay, what's my routine? What's my go-to move when this happens?
Exactly. Let's start with, before I get into that there's really two types of confidence relative to the platform.
Okay.
One is how you feel, and the other is how you act.
Okay.
And they don't have to be the same. In other words, I can feel very, let's say, not very confident at all. But when I step onto the stage, I have to act confident. In other words, I have to keep my shoulders back, my chin up. I need to speak slowly, take deep breaths. And I can practice that confidence. And here's the thing. If you act confident, you begin to feel more confident.
Right.
Now, when things go wrong, and they will, the audience will forgive you. If you just say something to the effect, if you want to acknowledge it, oh, that's not really what I meant by this. Let me start again.
Yeah.
And good. They're good with that. Just realize the audience is on your side. They want you to be successful.
They really do. And I think that can be something that gives us confidence. Oh, so many things that you're talking about have me leading in about a million different directions in my mind now. Let's talk about peak performance. You say that when it comes to peak performance and success, confidence is overrated. What do you mean by that?
Oftentimes people think that you need to be very, very confident to be highly successful. And that's not the case. And I'll give you two examples. One's a true story, and the other's a research experiment. Let's start with the research experiment. They looked at a group of, and I didn't even know they had this sport, rock climbing, speed rock climbing.
That's a thing. Okay. Especially in California, I'm sure.
Until I read this study. And they looked at the success of people and their confidence level. And they found the people who were a little less confident were more successful. Yeah, that's what I said. So I needed to find out more. And here was the difference. People who were highly confident tended to make two mistakes. One is they weren't careful enough. They were so confident that they were going to be successful that they didn't think about strategy all that well. So when a variation came up, they weren't prepared for it and they didn't deal with it. The second was they went too fast because they were so confident, they just bulled right ahead. So they were exhausted at the end. So when you're making mistakes and you're exhausted, you're probably not going to be successful. And that's what happened.
Wow.
Now, with the less confident people, what they did is they didn't move quite as fast because they didn't want to make mistakes. And they analyzed things a little more carefully to make sure this really was the right move. And so that lack of confidence actually worked to their advantage. Now, here's something else interesting about confidence. It really influences high performers more than it influences low performers. And here's what I mean by that. Let's take speakers. When I started out as a speaker, I was called a university professor, and it was really the case. So my PowerPoint slides each one had more text than a newspaper. It didn't matter how much confidence I had if I didn't have the skills. And so I could be highly confident, but if I stink, confidence doesn't wash that away.
Right.
And so it really doesn't influence it. Confidence really influences the people that have a reasonable set of skills, because that's when it'll really really influence your ability to execute those skills.
So we're looking at marrying the competence with the confidence in order to really understand what is going to be critical when you're on the platform.
Perfectly.
So,
Mm-hmm.
what does someone do who has to perform and doesn't feel confident that they're going to be successful, or worse, that they're somehow thinking they're going to fail? I'm doomed.
Okay.
That doesn't happen in our industry that much, but I know that we all have moments of self-doubt.
Absolutely. And I spoke to Cameron McCormick about this, and Jane, your former partner is Cameron's wife. Uh, and Cameron is coaching some of the most elite golfers in the world. One of his players is Jordan Spieth, who is perennially ranked in the top five, number one, won multiple major championships, including the Masters.
One of my favorites.
Yep. And so I asked Cameron. We were speaking together at a conference in Toronto last week, and it wasn't freezing cold, which was kind of nice. And I said, so what do you and Jordan do? And is that an issue? And he said, oh, yeah, Jordan, like everybody else, has peaks and valleys with his confidence. And here's what surprised me. Cam said that he does a video for Jordan going into major tournaments where he will highlight like things like him accepting a trophy or him making this incredible shot or this really difficult putt. And then sometimes he'll even set music to it. And so he says the night before the tournament, we'll sit down and we'll watch this video. And it really bolsters his confidence.
Wow, that is really cool. I wouldn't even have thought of that. We've talked before about visualization but really pulling all your history, because what really makes you confident is all the things that you've done in your past. Well, right? I mean, you have a portfolio. And so we talk about having like a file folder full of all the really best testimonials and the things that if you're ever feeling down, you could just pull from to say, we call it the Attagirl or the Attaboy file, something that'll just allow you to feel really good about yourself.
You're spot on with that, Jane, because the tendency for almost everybody, not everybody, but almost everybody, is we tend to be very hard on ourselves when we make a mistake.
Yeah.
We remember the mistakes. We remember the failures. We kind of gloss over the successes, if you will, and we focus on the failures. And so what often happens is those start to build up, and it really does erode our confidence, even though we have more experience. So what you're saying about the Attaboy or Attagirl file is a terrific idea for building confidence.
Yeah, I think it's really easy for us to forget what we've accomplished in our life. And that's one of the things that we're constantly training people to do, is to look back from where we've come rather than always looking forward to where we want to go. Yes. Well, I want to have 50 engagements a year at 15,000 on the board, but I'm here. And so there always, Dan Sullivan calls that the gap. You're always sitting in the gap of wanting not what you have yet, rather than looking backwards to what you've accomplished already. What do you think about that?
I think Dan's spot on with that one too. You reminded me of a golfer, Annika Sorenstam. After every major tournament, or actually every round, she would sit down and write out the answer to 3 questions. And the first one was, what did I do well? Because you got to play to your strengths. And, I do this after every speech, Jane.
Oh, this is neat. I'm going to let's take notes, and we're going to put this in the show notes too. What did I do well?
What did I do well? And it might have been even before I got on stage, I met some of the people, or I did my homework, or I checked my technology and it was really innovative. It worked well, or I met people out, whatever it was. What did I do well? The next question is, what could I improve? Not what was bad.
Right.
And and what I liked about this when I spoke to Annika about this was that no matter how good we are, we can always improve. And no matter how bad we are, there's always something we did well. So we got to recognize those. So what can I improve? And then here's the third question. How do I improve it?
Oh, how? Okay. So it's not just what, but you actually look at how you can improve it. I remember when we went to the Masters, that we were leaving, and it was getting dark. It was 6 o'clock or after that at night. And we saw one of the golfers, I can't think of his name at this moment, having a mental hiccup on that, but he's just somebody that you would absolutely never imagine would be out there, and he's on the putting green practicing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you think, okay, day one of the Masters is now over, and there he is practicing, and that's part of the routine, isn't it?
Yep. Mm-hmm. And many of those players are there at dawn. One of the things, and you can have your opinion about his personal life, but Tiger Woods is one of the hardest workers I
right.
ever seen. It wouldn't have been. I've been on many tournaments where we're leaving the practice tee and Tiger's still out there. He's the only one there.
Yeah,
Patrick was another one. Yeah,
and that's why when it got dark with him and Phil in their tournament, the one-on-one head-to-head, it was probably no big deal because they're both used to practicing in the dark, right? Yeah.
Phil's another one who's a hard worker. In fact, when he does a practice round, Phil normally has to have lunch sent out to him because he's out there for 8 hours. Exploring every aspect of the hole. Yep.
We think that it's this glory. And
right.
There are so many things that are similar to speaking. Some of the best speakers out there are sitting up there. I remember Zig Ziglar sitting in the front row taking notes at a convention, and he was probably 80 some odd years old, and he's sitting there vigorously taking notes. I mean, he just had this, let's talk about this element of constant learning that people need to have in their lives. I mean, I think the constant learning is part of what gives you confidence, wouldn't you?
It does, yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, preparation will do that. Mm-hmm. In fact, in your book, Jane, one of the things I really like is the way you do the ready, aim, fire, and you make it very clear, don't fire until you're ready.
Right.
And to your aim, and you know where you're going. And, you mentioned something earlier, I think it was last week, about clarity builds confidence. And I wanted you to talk a little bit more about that. Because
I want to be really specific about that, because clarity building confidence, for me, the application to that is in your marketing and when you're on the phone with a client. If you don't have that clarity going into that client call. So let's say you haven't picked your lane yet.
Right.
How can you possibly get on the phone with a client and say, I am the person for this job because this is all I do? Mm-hmm. That's kind of your goal, is to have that type of clarity. And that's how I talk about it, building confidence. What we're talking about here has lots of different elements to it. What do you think about clarity building confidence in terms of talking to clients or marketing or whatever it might be?
I agree with you 100%. In fact, when I get booked for a speech, and one of the things that I do is I don't send a questionnaire. I have to have a phone call. We have to have a conversation. I got to get to know your people. And then the next step for me is what you just said about clarity. And here's how I think of it. It came from a research study we did years ago. I asked myself this question. If Jane Atkinson called anybody from that audience 2 weeks after the speech and said, what do you remember?
Mm-hmm.
What do I want them to say?
That's good.
That forms the foundation of my talk.
That's really good.
That's exactly what you said, right, Jane? Clarity.
Yeah.
What am I trying to communicate? Then the next question is, how am I going to get this message across?
Right. Exactly. Okay. So let's say, we do know that that's an element of it. And we have people come into we have this community called the Wealthy Speakers Sprint. Mm-hmm. And the sprint is all about, of the ready, aim, fire, it's all about the fire stage. And a couple of people have had to say, oh, wait, I recognize that I'm actually not ready for firing. They really want to get out there to sell, but they've recognized early on that, I have a problem here. I'm not quite ready to really take all the action that is required in order to make the sprint. And you've been in this one lane for a really long time, so I don't know that you have that same problem. But what would you say, just on the vein of confidence, though? let's say you are lacking it somehow. We know that clarity is going to help. What else can people do to develop confidence?
That's great. I want to respond to the first thing that you said, though, and then I'll give you some tips on how to do that.
Okay.
That when I said confidence,
Go ahead.
I'm trying to think what we were talking about. Yes. Circle back. When you talk about ready, aim, fire, they don't feel like they're 100% ready to fire. That's
Right.
where I said confidence can sometimes be overrated because it prevents you from actually taking the next step. You don't have to feel 100% ready or 100% confidence to move forward. You can move forward. And what really the question is I'm going to give this the best effort with what I have. And then I'm going to learn from it. Because success is a standard. I mean, you can either be 8 or you can be 4. You're going to be somewhere in between. It's not an absolute, and that's the same with confidence. It's not something either you're completely lacking in confidence or you completely have confidence. It's somewhere on the scale. And as long as I'm just going to give this the best effort I can. I feel prepared to do this.
Right.
Done everything possible. I have the routines, and now it's just showtime. And be ready to look at it afterwards and say, now, how could I use that experience to grow moving forward?
Love it. So you'll ask yourself your 3 questions.
Yeah.
What did I do well? What could I improve? How would I improve? That's really an interesting question. So if I love that, because I think that people think that the confidence has to be there before you actually start to move into any new venture. And I've had a lot of clients who have taken a really long time to get there because they thought that they had to have every little detail sorted out, when in fact sometimes just moving forward the details start to sort themselves out. That's an interesting thing, that doing it actually builds the confidence required to do it.
Right. Yeah. In fact, I was talking, one of the coaches I interviewed is an American football coach. Bobby Bowden is his name. Bobby, at the time I was interviewing, had won more American college football games than anybody in history. And we were talking after he had lost one of his games, and he said, and I asked him the question, being the most winningest coach, you must love to win. And he said, it's really not about winning for me as a coach, because it's the athletes who execute. He says, but I'll tell you this, I hate to lose. And when we lose, it's because we weren't prepared. And that falls on me. So preparation isn't important. So we started talking about preparation. He says, planning is not about scripting the future. It's being prepared for the future. He says, when the ball goes in the air at kickoff, when we step onto the stage to start to speak, events are going to happen.
Right.
The mic's going to stop. Our technology's not going to work. The audience isn't going to react the way we thought. So how do we deal with that?
Right.
And preparation is about being prepared for the events that take place. And just know it's not going to work out the way you think it might be.
And I actually take it even further with my clients. And okay, what are you going to do if somebody's cell phone goes off? What are you going to do if the fire alarm goes off? What if the person in the front row drops over and there's a medical emergency? Like, you really should have all of those scenarios kind of mapped out in your head. And I think our goal is to be gracious through whatever happens.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can't lose your cool. No matter how you feel, you can't lose your cool.
What's the craziest thing that you have ever done that has happened to you on the platform? What's the kookiest thing that ever happened in the middle of a speech for you?
The most embarrassing?
Okay, let's go there.
I was speaking in Berlin, and there was about 3,000 in the Berlin Convention Center. There was about 3,000 people in the audience, and I was delivering my presentation in German. And I was about 10 minutes into it.
Okay, yeah. Wait. You speak German to that degree that you could present in German?
let me finish the story.
Okay.
10 minutes into the talk, I see a hand go up in the second row. And so I called on the person and I said, yes. And they said, Professor Shemp, would you mind speaking English? Because we understand your English better than we understand your German.
Okay. So back up to my question. The answer
Right.
might be maybe. How did
So
you ever have enough confidence to even attempt that, though? That's
that,
crazy.
that was a shock. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I said, well, I've been speaking English most of my life, so I think I could give that a shot. But boy, was I embarrassed. And yeah,
Oh,
that did shake my confidence.
yeah.
But
Well,
another situation I think that was more in line with what you were talking about. Had one of those dream gigs on the Cayman Islands, and I was at one of their fancy resorts. I think it was a Marriott, and the entire island lost all its power. So
oh,
that's my microphone, that's my PowerPoint, that's the lights in the room. And for whatever, and my topic, Jane, was making decisions under pressure.
how many people were in the audience, Paul? That's funny.
Probably about 600 or 700.
Oh
You
my
know,
goodness.
yeah.
That's a big
So
audience.
I thought, okay, what are we going to do? And for whatever reason, maybe this comes from living in Southeast Asia for a while. I said, now the air conditioning's gone off. What I'd like you to do is just get up slowly and please everybody go get a bottle of water. They were in the back of the room and come back. And that gave me enough time to think about what I was going to do.
Oh my,
Yeah.
wow. And yeah, the situation like that, you're really flying by the seat of your pants.
Yep, exactly. So,
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about overconfidence.
oh, perfect. Yeah.
What's our measurement to say, whoops, I'm in a situation where I'm actually beyond what I should be?
Mm-hmm. Oh, overconfidence? You mean like I believe that no matter what happens, I'm going to be great? Is that
Yeah.
what you mean by overconfidence?
Well, overconfidence, it could be in, like you said, the rock climbers, or what's a signal to somebody that says, whoops, I think I
Yeah.
overshot it there?
That's a great question because we discovered that overconfidence is the number one reason that experts fail. The number one reason they fail is they're overconfident. All right, how do you know if you're overconfident? If you feel like you really don't have to prepare. If you hear in the back of your mind saying, I've done this 1,000 times, I could do this in my sleep. Those are usually the kinds of bells that should go off and say, wait a minute, go
Right.
through my routine. Make sure I've checked all of the dots or crossed all the T's.
Right.
Go through my checklist. Don't get carried away by thinking you've got it nailed because as soon as you do, that's when you're going to get nailed.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So, really understanding that we do definitely have to continue to have a certain level of, and one of the things that I think is the most important that you bring on the stage with you anytime is humility.
Yeah.
We just lost President George Bush, and they're really talking a lot about how humble he was.
Jane, it's interesting you bring that up. We just completed a study, we haven't published it yet, where we looked at the strength and conditioning coaches in Major League Baseball, the NFL, the National Hockey League, and the National Basketball Association. And we wanted them to describe the skills, the knowledge, and experience expert coaches needed at those levels. The number one skill, and I wasn't sure this was a skill, but they said it was humility.
Wow.
Yeah.
Doesn't that surprise you at those levels that would even be a consideration?
Yep. I was shocked to find that. But yes, it supports what you just said 100%. People at the top of their field are very humble.
Yeah. And humble, I think, then leads to kind of checking your ego at the door, which then maybe allows you to make it about them and not yourself. And that's one of the biggest tips that we can give for platform skills, right?
Huge. Yeah, it is about them. It's not about us as speakers. And I'll give you another one, being humble. Social support. For example, two of my dearest friends, you know them both, Waldo Waldman and Dan Thurman. Dan's currently the president of the National Speakers Association. We go watch each other speak and are constantly looking for feedback and how can we improve this. I remember the time Dan had this rope drawn up with these flames underneath it, and he was going to walk across this rope on stage with these flames going up. Fortunately, that's an idea he never actually had the confidence. But again, it's always trying to get better, but asking for help. And people will give that to you. So humility is, I didn't get here by myself. I had a lot of help. And, I may be wrong. And so you have to be open to that. So again, going back to confidence, people who are overconfident don't have that humility. They have arrogance instead. And that's not a healthy attribute to have.
I like it. So is there anything specific to professional speakers regarding the confidence necessary, to kind of make it to the bigs, to make it to the wealthy speaker status? Is there one thing that, okay, this is what I'm going for?
Keep learning, keep improving.
Constant improvement. Back to the 3 questions.
Yeah. And again, Jane, that's why, I signed up for your program, because in my speaking business, the weakest part was I didn't know how to run a speaking business, if you will. I didn't know how to make a marketing call. And when I did, I didn't feel very confident. And so the kinds of information I got from your book and your program helped me to do that. So thank you very much for that. And
I really have said publicly over the last, I don't know when I actually identified it, but I recognize that I'm in the business of selling confidence. I didn't even really realize that that's what I was doing, but I give people the confidence to say, this is my fee and I know that I'm worth it. And and the reason that they might know that they're worth it might be things that I've told them about what's going on in the market and what other people are doing and so on and so forth. And so there's quite a bit to that allows people to really stand tall in their fees and not get beat up every time. And really, and the wealthy speaker mentality, by the way, is one that says, I don't expect for anyone to negotiate my fees. How about that for a level of confidence, just even out there in the mindset of what your internal expectation, how much are internal expectations at play here?
I think they're tremendous. And you're right. We tend to undervalue ourselves because we know where the weak spots are, and we tend not to look to the strong points. And so really it's all about, the value that we deliver. And you've got to understand what that is. If you look at an audience of 100 people, and let's say it's a corporate group, and for each one of those people, you give them some measure of success that's going to increase their profitability to the company. You've more than paid for your fee.
Exactly. Let's use you as an example. If you go in and speak to a group of senior executives and give them some tools that are going to help them perform better, what is that worth to the organization?
Exactly.
I think we need to be raising your fees right now, Paul, on this call. You heard it here first.
All right. In 2019, I will raise my fees, Jane.
Okay, 2019. You heard it here first, everybody. Right. All right. If people want to get in touch with you, what should they do?
The best way would be through my website, which is www.performancemattersinc.com.
All right. Well,
or if they just Googled my name, Paul Schempp, SCHEMPP, that'll probably come up too.
2 P's. All right. That's fantastic. Well, everyone, thank you, Wealthy Speaker listeners. We really appreciate you coming over here to hear this podcast today. If you're not a subscriber over at iTunes or on Stitcher or Google Play, please do so. And make sure you keep an eye out for our flash briefings that are now available for your Alexa product that you wake up every morning with. How cool is that? Keep us in mind for that. If you go to our show notes, we'll put links for both the U.S. flash briefings and the Canadian flash briefings. And Monica, let's also put in links to our show on the various networks. Paul Schempp, thank you so much for being here to talk to us about how to have the confidence of elite athletes. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. It was a pleasure as always.
Most appreciated. And with that, we'll say, see you soon, Wealthy Speakers. Bye for now. Thanks for listening to the Wealthy Speakers Show. Please visit speakerlauncher.com for your free Wealthy Speaker audit, and visit speakerlauncher.com/podcast for show notes and many more resources to help you catapult your speaking business. See you soon, Wealthy Speakers.